All for the Winner is Stephen Chow's parody of the God of Gamblers movies. If you're unfamiliar with that, there are two movies starring Chow Yun-fat. And it's basically, you know, in James Bond movies where James Bond goes to a casino and he sees the villain playing a game, and then he challenges the villain and beats the villain, whether it be poker or whatever, a game of chance. It's like that, but that would be the finale of the movie, and the rest of the movie would be like villains trying to shoot the hero or kidnap the hero, and the hero's really good at gambling. So All for the Winner is Stephen Chow's parody of those movies. He plays a lovable but dumb nephew of a gambler who has the magical ability to look through solid objects, and that can come in really handy, you know, when playing mahjong or poker. Or he also has the ability to change cards or bet slips by concentrating really hard. He can only do that every 2 months though. So in the movie, the gambler uncle tries to exploit his nephew. They can make money, but whenever they try to spend it, they get into trouble. The main character, Chow, I think his name is, he gets involved with villainous Mr. Hung, who wants to test his powers and then win a tournament. The movie's full of action, but none of the action bits are very interesting, except for maybe there's a scene where these women use ancient Chinese weapons against guns. That was pretty cool. But the movie is can be funny sometimes, but sometimes it can be painfully unfunny. Like there's a scene where the main character, he's really sad about the female lead not being around, so they get an impostor and they go on a date. It's just really stretched out and not very funny. All for the Winner has its moments, but ultimately it's one of the lesser Stephen Chow movies in my opinion. So I give it a 6 out of 10. God of Gamblers 2 is a sequel to All for the Winner, but is also an official spin-off, starring Andy Lau as a little dagger, now called Michael. He was a character in God of Gamblers. He has been the protege of the God of Gamblers for about a year, so he's got lots of skills. He goes around winning things for charity, and he gets the nickname Knight of Gamblers. Meanwhile, Sing Cho is still poor. He decides to call himself the Saint of Gamblers, and makes it his destiny to meet the Knight of Gamblers and eventually learn from the God of Gamblers. And meanwhile, there's a villain brewing. He wants to take the title of Knight of Gamblers and do his own charity cruise, but keep the money and not give it away. So this movie is a little bit more like the God of Gamblers movies because it's an official spin-off. It's not a parody, so it takes itself more seriously. There's a lot of good action sequences. The action scenes are well directed by Wang Jing. All for the Winner was done by Jeffrey Lau, I believe. So the action scenes are better, and the movie feels more like a crime thriller. The first half is more action and comedy. The second half is mostly gambling. The movie picks up. They also introduce a villainous character to match Sing Chow. His name is Tycoon. He also has the ability to move things with his mind and look at things. So he adds a new nemesis and adds a new layer of danger, and I really enjoyed that. So God of Gamblers 2, I feel, because it takes itself more seriously, it's more enjoyable. I give it a 7 out of 10. God of Gamblers Part 3 Back to Shanghai is the final film of the Saint of Gamblers trilogy. The villainous Tycoon from the last film is back. He wants revenge on the Saint of Gamblers, so he gets his friends, this little network of psychics. The movie decides to build the world and actually label them as psychics and people with powers, and they're not just one guy with powers like in All for the Winner. They're actually a network of people that have fire abilities or, you know, pyrokinesis, telekinesis, things like that. So the group of psychics attack Saint of Gamblers, and using their combined powers, they can bend space and time. And they all go back to Shanghai in 1937, where the Saint of Gamblers meets his grandfather, famous Ding Lik. He is like a forefather of fighting the Japanese, and they have to deal with crafty Japanese villains. So this movie is very similar to Back to the Future. It's almost like Stephen Chow's Back to the Future. It's very funny, really good production designs. It adds a nice fresh spin with the whole time travel aspect, but the movie takes itself very seriously though. So he gets involved in gang wars. There's a funny scene with the Axe Gang. He gets involved in gangster troubles. There's these new Japanese villains that team up with Tycoon. They're very crafty and very dangerous. I like how there's a new villain not the generic crime lord like usual. And the movie also likes to play around with love triangles and things like that. And also, of course, paradoxes. So, God of Gamblers Part 3, Back to Shanghai, adds a fresh spin to the franchise. For me, I feel it's the best film in the trilogy. It has a poignant love story, funny, action-packed. I give God of Gamblers Part 3, Back to Shanghai a 8 out of 10.